I don't know. So should I start? Like, if you have enough people, this is recorded, and then I'll just do 2-minute intro, really, like just welcoming you back to the community and thanking you for giving us a crash course on Flutter. And then, like, this meetup is not long, so I don't need to bribe you. Probably everybody's going to be here in an hour. If you stay until the end, when Leigha is going to tell, we're going to do mining raffle for any of their products. And then if you're first time with us, like, we have kind of various topics. So a couple of meetups ago, we were celebrating 5 years of serverless Toronto group, and two topics were data-driven, and one of the presenters was going, agile data warehousing design book and the Bean methodology. And for 20 minutes, like quick course, he couldn't cover anything. So we're lucky to have him back, dive deeper into database modeling, but it's more from the point of view talking with the business, to have the common language before you dive. So it's not for the tech, it's more for requirements gathering through modeling. And then feature presenter, I had to put these slides together. The one behind is from Stack Overflow, showing how popular Flutter is, but hyperlink is to your previous talk here. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing. Please take it away.
Great, thank you. I'll share my screen. I have a couple of slides, but feel free to interrupt with any questions. Yeah, I'm Leigha. I'm a product manager here at Google. So I previously worked on Google Cloud. I worked on Looker and BigQuery, and that's how I've come to this meeting before. I know you all are more back-end folks, but like I mentioned a few minutes ago, I've been doing data for a while, and I was interested in getting more into the front end. So I transferred to the Flutter team within Google, and now I'm a product manager for Flutter. I specifically work on iOS development with Flutter and also design experiences. So like how we might integrate with design tools, or just how you can build really beautiful apps with Flutter. So we could start with just a discussion of what is Flutter. And usually when I'm talking to people, I say Flutter is a framework for creating user interfaces that run on any platform. So we can kind of dissect what the sentence actually means. Let's start with the user interfaces piece. So you all are technologists, so you're probably already familiar with back-end versus front-end. But on the back end, you might be storing and processing data, or dealing with APIs and servers, or having more complex business logic. Whereas on the front end, you're dealing with what the user is actually seeing and interacting with. So building different UI components, handling the layouts, handling inputs and gestures and animations. I included some screenshots of this app called Brickit, which was built with Flutter. And it's really cool. If any of you have Legos, or if you have kids with like Lego bricks hanging around your house, you can use this app to scan the bricks that you have, and then it gives you new ideas of things to build with whatever bricks. So it's really cool, and I thought it was a good example of Flutter. But we can see the different UI components. So these are things like icon buttons, maybe images or embedded videos, text boxes, or like segment controls, things like that. You also handle inputs and gestures with Flutter, like we mentioned before. And my favorite part of Flutter is building really cool animations. It's really flexible, so you can build some like really beautiful hero animations into your app, or really unique graphics. I don't think I embedded the actual video here, unfortunately. I just took a screenshot. But we recently added support for something called shaders, which are just like these little programs that run on the GPU. But you can create super neat effects. So this shader like pixelated our mascot, which is this little bird named Dash, who I have sitting on my desk. But you can just create these really, really cool visual effects that make your app kind of stand out from the rest. So that's the user interface piece. Now we can talk about the framework. So framework is usually, just some pre-built pieces of code that make it easier to build your UI. So someone mentioned Android Studio before. Here's a little GIF of working with Flutter and Android Studio. It's kind of hard to see, but I'll pull up some code in a few minutes. But you can see within the framework, we just have these things called widgets, which are just like pre-built UI components that you can nest to build your app. So Flutter framework uses a declarative style of programming, similar to like Jetpack Compose if you work on Android, Swift UI for iOS, or React and React Native. So it looks very similar, the code, to those other frameworks, in that you're kind of declaring what you want to see if you're given a certain state for your app. So you do things like say, okay, button, or like, you know, title or text box, whatever you want to call it. So Flutter is written using the Dart programming language. The framework is defined in Dart, and when you're writing a Flutter app, you're using the Dart programming language. Dart is really great for a couple different reasons. It's pretty easy to learn. The syntax reminds me a lot of JavaScript. But what really makes it special is that it compiles directly to machine code for the devices that we support. So before, someone mentioned like React Native, and usually when you're dealing with cross-platform frameworks, you have this like bridge. So maybe you take your JavaScript and you kind of interpret it or translate it down to the native UI components. But with Flutter, you're actually translating that directly to machine code. So it makes Flutter apps much more performant. And it's one of the reasons why the Flutter engineers chose the Dart programming language. Okay, so that was the framework piece. Now let's talk about the platform piece. So I said user interfaces that run on any platform. Flutter is most well known for mobile development. So from a single code base, you can create an Android app, you can create an iOS app. Because of the way Flutter is architected, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, you can really build these custom design experiences that look similar across, or look identical across all different device platforms. So your app will look exactly the same on Android and on iOS, if that's how you want it to be. But Flutter also supports web, which I think is really interesting, and desktop. So Windows, Mac, Linux. And this last icon is to represent embedded, because all of Flutter is open source and people build custom embedders. We have a whole framework for building your own custom embedders so that you can run Flutter apps on all other different types of devices. So this is really interesting for like, we have some customers that are in the automotive business, so they'll create the UI that you see in a car using Flutter. And people build like all kinds of cool stuff. Let me share this tab. I'll show this quick video that someone put on where he's just using a Raspberry Pi and this like flexible little piece of screen that he got, and building a Flutter app into this little screen, which let me fast forward a little bit. So he has this Flutter app that he's built, and then he takes this little screen and Raspberry Pi and all the sensors and kind of plugs it into this jacket to make a smart jacket that has different metrics like your health measurements and blood pressure and all that kind of stuff. So super cool. Let me go back to my presentation. So yeah, that was kind of the embedded piece. So when we say you can build Flutter apps for every device or every screen, we really mean it. So super cool stuff. Like I mentioned, there are other UI frameworks out there. You might be familiar with Swift UI for iOS, Jetpack Compose, React Native. And Flutter takes a fundamentally different approach than a lot of these other frameworks in a few different ways. So you can talk a little bit about Flutter's architecture. So I mentioned before that a lot of other cross-platform frameworks, they work through like a sort of interpreter or like a bridge layer. So you might have your code, your app code at the top, and it's actually translated into native views on the platform. So if you're writing like an iOS app, your code gets translated into like individual iOS views, which can be good because then you have like the iOS design system, and maybe it's easier to like stay up to date with some of the design language updates that Apple makes. But it can have some performance impacts, and you're not really getting direct access to like those underlying APIs. So Flutter's architecture really supports like more flexibility when it comes to building apps. So we often tell developers, if you're using Flutter, you can control every pixel on the screen, and you're basically given a blank canvas. And that's because Flutter is shipped with its own rendering engine. So that's that green layer that we see underneath the framework. So this renderer actually just like takes the framework itself. So when you say like, hey, build me a button, it takes that framework code and it translates it into low-level commands for your graphics hardware. So I keep using iOS as an example because I focus on the iOS portion, but iOS devices have this framework called Metal, which is for running like really low-level graphics commands directly on the GPU. So Flutter's engine will take the framework and basically distill it into rendering pipelines that run on the Metal framework. So it's really similar to using a native framework in that way, in that your framework code is talking directly to the GPU on your device. But the difference is, we're basically embedding this Flutter code or these Flutter rendering objects onto like a blank native app, if you will. So you get lower level access to like some of those drawing commands when you're using Flutter compared to other frameworks. And that's what enables people to build like really custom apps or like have more flexibility when it comes to design systems or different animations. Of course, there's trade-offs with every framework. Sometimes more flexibility means that you have to do more work to get it to look the way you want. So there's always going to be like pros and cons with whatever framework you decide. So I thought it'd be helpful to just talk a little bit about the types of companies that use Flutter. Since Flutter was first launched in, I think, 2016 or something like that, there's been 5 million developers who have used Flutter and over 700,000 apps. And this data was I pulled it back in January, so it's definitely gone up since then. And like I mentioned before, Flutter is completely open source. So the framework, the Dart programming language, the rendering engine, all of this is available, every single line on GitHub. People can fork it, contribute to it, open up pull requests, just inspect the source code for your own knowledge. And Flutter is actually number 3 in terms of projects on GitHub for the most contributors. So that's like a nice little stat. I myself have contributed some pull requests to Flutter. It's a very nice community. I'm not a software engineer, I'm a product manager, but I found it really easy to use and the community to be super welcoming and supportive when you want to add new features or learn about new aspects. So there are a ton of different brands, both within Google and outside of Google, that are using Flutter. Some notable ones are like Sonos, BMW. I don't know if it's here. Oh yeah, it's here. BMW has a mobile app that's built with Flutter. And I talked to them the other day and they mentioned that they have now over 10 million active users on their mobile app. So that was pretty crazy. And like I said, we have some Google customers on here too. So if you want to see more about like different customers or learn about their use case or their apps, we have this great showcase where you can read about their stories. And like we were mentioning before, the Wondrous app is a really great reference for what you can build with Flutter. I'll play the music, but Wondrous is an app that allows you to explore the wonders of the world. And it's available in the iOS App Store and the Google Play Store. And it basically just features a totally custom design system with all these beautiful graphics and unique animations. And the entire code is open source. So it's really meant to just be like an example of best practices. And when we built this app, we really paid close attention to accessibility and best practices when it comes to adaptive design. So if you're looking at this on desktop versus tablet versus mobile, you'll notice the design adapt so that it meets the needs of that form factor. So yeah, anyway, if you're interested in that, you can visit wondrous.app to see the source code. And there are a bunch of blogs written by the developers who worked on this that goes through all the best practices and things that they learned. Yeah, so now I just wanted to show some quick examples, but mostly leave time for questions. Let me share this tab. I'm not sure if you can see the like URL bar when I share the screen, but this is dartpad.dev. And this is a great little interactive way to run some Dart or Flutter code in your browser just to like test things out and play around with some samples. If you wanted to install the entire SDK, you can just click that button and it will bring you to the guide that goes through all the steps to install Flutter and use it locally. But we have a bunch of neat little samples over here that you can run directly in your browser. When you first create a Flutter app, this is kind of like the example that we show. And I can update it and increment that count. But just to give you an idea of what's going on over here, I mentioned before when we were talking about the framework that Flutter is made up of UI components called widgets. So in Flutter, everything is a widget. So you can see that this new class I've created, my app, is just extending our base widget class. And here I'm creating a material app, which is just an app that follows material design system guidelines. I can change things like the theme. And then our home, I'm just creating this new widget down here, which is my home page. My home page is pretty simple. This is just telling me that I'm actually needing a stateful widget. So there are a bunch of different ways that Flutter manages state. One is by using this combination of stateless widgets, so widgets that don't change based on the state, and stateful widgets, which extend this state object down here. So here we have our one variable that's part of our state is just our counter. We have this increment counter helper function, which once it's triggered, it resets the state to increment the counter. And here's where we actually have our UI code for the home screen. So we have a scaffold, which kind of is just one way to lay out the app. And the scaffold has like an app bar, which is what we see up here. It has a body where we're just creating a column, which is essentially two multiple stacked widgets on top of each other. And one interesting thing about Flutter is when I say like everything's a widget, it's also used to like modify individual widgets. So instead of center being like an attribute of the column widget itself, we just wrap column with a center widget, and that tells it to center it on the screen. And we have our action button down here that increments the counter when pressed. So really basic example, but tries to cover, the general things like state and laying out your home screen and incrementing based on clicks, things like that. But there are lots of other cool samples you have here. There's one that features some animations, which is fun. I'll give that a second to run so I can click on these and like see some cool animations. There's one that goes through examples of how to create like a draggable box. There's one that uses the Google Fonts plugin, which allows you just to really easily pull a font from Google Fonts and use that in your app. And lots of other things that are both just more pure Dart apps and actual Flutter apps. But yeah, that's the kind of it. I wanted to leave time for questions. So let me open the Meet back up so I can see everyone.
Wow, that was inspiring, at least for me, who is new to front-end development. So, because I'm not front-end person, I will leave the questions for people who are. Stuart, not saw. Anybody else? Jonathan? Go ahead. You don't need to raise the hand.
Hey, Leigha, thanks for the presentation. Like when it comes to like the third-party ecosystem, like libraries and stuff, right? How active is Flutter in that sense?
It's super active. Let me actually just show you. So we have this package ecosystem called pub.dev. So you can search for different packages here. We have this program called Flutter Favorites, which has a bunch of packages that like our team has manually reviewed and like given kind of like the Flutter official stamp of approval. You can see most popular packages, and you can filter based on platform SDKs. But here you can see there are almost 35,000 packages. So there's a ton. And I'm wondering if are you asking that because of like hesitance around having access to native APIs?
No, I mean it's more like because I'm more of a cobbler of software. So having like a third-party ecosystem that gives you that base functionality is always helpful. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very active community, I will say. Lots of stuff going on. So these are just like actual packages, but there are lots of really great community-driven courses, books, tutorials, samples, YouTube videos. So it's definitely a really fun community.
Cynthia, go ahead. You raised your hand.
Hi guys, good evening, and thank you for hosting this meeting. So I literally started reading a book on Flutter, which is from Marco L. DiPoloni, and also actually two books, Flutter for Dummies and also that one. So my question really is, as I'm learning and I'm fairly doing well in the development process. However, I have a question as far as like if because I'm not totally versed in this one particular framework, how can I help you guys with like the debugging or like contributing? I'm trying to figure that out because again, I'm still learning the landscape with Flutter. So if anyone can kind of direct me, if GitHub is the place to be where I should look at projects, if there's any projects that need to be, I don't know, like enhanced or supported or what have you.
Yeah, like our GitHub issues are the best place to understand what the community or different developers want. So if you're interested in contributing, I would say go to our GitHub repositories. I can pull it up right now.
Okay.
And check out the issue. So we even have this label. I think it's called like good first contribution. So
right on.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we've actually added some labels that were like, we think this will be a pretty easy fix. So if it's someone's first time contributing, you can go and find that, and you can kind of sort by like what people have upvoted it the most, which is kind of like a signal that people want it. And then you can just dive into the issue and see if people have added information to it and try to work on it. And we have there's a whole wiki page that has to do with contributing, so the contributor guide. And
wonderful. Okay. Yeah.
it tells you, like join Discord. There's a whole channel on Discord that's like specifically for first-time contributors. So you can join Discord and be like, hey, I'm running into this issue. Can someone help me get started or whatever?
I literally today just got onto Discord, and then I came across your meeting, so I was like, yes. I'm very grateful, guys. Thank you guys very much.
Yeah. And there's lots of, this is just the main Flutter framework repo, but there's lots of repos. There's like packages. There's also our website. So if you want to contribute, but you're like, hey, I've noticed something wrong in our docs, and that could be your first contribution too. It's just like editing.
Right on. All right. Thanks.
Nelson has the hand raised.
Very cool. Is there, before we get to the next question, is there also a Discord or a user group, or sorry, an area for users as opposed to devs or contributors, just like a user group one?
Yeah, Discord is also for that. There's a bunch of different channels. So there's one for like people like hackers are just like people using Flutter, and then there are certain ones that are for like contributors.
Okay, so for general questions on like what would be the best practice for doing this, or yeah, okay, sounds good.
Yeah, you can even see like who we recommend. So we say like this one is for Flutter contributors, but this one is for like anyone or anyone.
Right.
You know?
Perfect. Sorry, not so to cut you off. Please go ahead.
No worries. Love the presentation. My question was that since Flutter has its own rendering engine, is it possible to make applications that look very similar cross-platform? Because like you can be like, I guess you can begin to like control like how it looks on a pixel to pixel level, if that makes sense.
Exactly. Like that's a big benefit for a lot of people who want their branding to shine through, and they want their app to look like very consistent across web, desktop, iOS, Android. So because the rendering engine talks to like really low level GPU commands, your UI looks essentially exactly the same if it's the same device size. But you can also change that if you didn't want it to. Like I talked to a lot of iOS developers who want to have some of those like native feeling gestures or animations. And that's where we use like something called the material library and Cupertino library, which is like our take on Apple's design system. And you can kind of like mix and match and adapt between the two. So you can choose to like create your own widget or just use material on both iOS and Android, or Cupertino on iOS or Android, or like adapt between the two based on the platform.
Awesome.
We have a question in the chat, Jose.
Oh, yeah. So I see. Last I checked, embedding a dartpad was something that the Flutter team did to document their code. Any chance it gets open to others, it would be pretty cool to document our packages and code with built-in examples. I'm pretty sure that you can embed dartpad. I actually don't know. There's maybe a specific link. Let's see if we click share. So I did know that if you create a GitHub gist, then you can use that URL in dartpad. So you use the ID and then you get this specific URL to this would be all of your code that's in the main.dart file. I'm pretty sure that you can embed this somehow, but I'm not exactly sure.
And just to add more context to that, I think I guess I was trying to explain, you know, how when you have on, I don't know, the button on the Dart Docs, right? You have like an embedded dartpad right there that you can change and just play with it.
Yeah.
On Dart Docs, at least as of right now, I haven't found a way to embed like a dartpad that is output that is like part of that Dart Docs documentation, you know.
Gotcha. So have you tried this? This isn't what you need, like just embedding the iframe?
I'll have to double check, because given that the Dart Docs get generated by comment code on the code, you have to go through the parser to put that, and I'll have to double check. But last time I tried, I don't think it worked.
Yeah, I think what we do in our docs is we do two different things. We have a Dart doc to embed the code directly into our documentation and dartpad to run it. I'm not sure if they actually talk to each other even in our website, but I could be wrong. Yeah. Any other questions, Cynthia?
Don't be shy. Maybe
No, I'm okay.
yeah, she raised the hand before. Stuart, you had some questions coming
Let me
in.
take it down,
Can you
sorry.
repeat that?
Yeah. So no, yeah, I can see. So I what do we do with all these books now?
Android Studio. Well,
This one. So what's going on with this? Is this product sticks around? This is a great language for that anyway. I rarely buy books, but these ones are so thick I had to buy them. But yeah, they take up a huge amount of space. Android Studio, any idea what's going on? Is that going to be continued to be a product from Google? Maybe you can't say, but I mean, I'm pretty impressed with what I saw. And I was looking at some of the Flutter sites you mentioned. Yeah, there's some good looking stuff out there.
I would be I mean, I don't talk to the Android Studio team much because I specifically work on iOS development with Flutter. So when I'm using an IDE, I'm usually using Xcode and VS Code. But I have not heard any indication that Google would stop supporting Android Studio. I mean, the Android Studio is the default IDE for Android development, and a lot of stuff actually gets packaged with Android Studio when you're developing an Android app. So it would be pretty difficult to do it without Android Studio.
Okay.
And on the Flutter team, we support Android Studio as a official Flutter IDE as well.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Good presentation. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, Mahesh.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, first of all, yeah, it was a very good presentation. Thanks for that. So, and yeah. So my question is around the release management, right? So when are we going to see the next release and any major releases being planned? And also, I have learned, so we don't support watch OS, TV OS and all right now. So what's the plan around that? So
Yeah, so when it comes to our releases, we aim to release on about a quarterly basis. So our last release was near the end of January. So our next release should be coming up pretty soon. So yeah, you can stay tuned for more information on that release. If you're tagging along to like Google I/O stuff or keeping up with that, I'm sure we'll be talking more about the next Flutter release in that time frame. But when it comes to watchOS and tvOS, I know specifically on the Apple side, we've been looking into like Apple Watch development and Apple TV development, but it's a lot of work for us to officially support that, like on the infrastructure side in terms of testing and everything. So I think we don't have any official plans to support it right now, but what we would like to do is continue to make it easier for people to build their own custom embedders or build like companion apps that are maybe the UI is defined in native, but they talk directly to your Flutter app.
okay, thanks. And to add to that, I mean, okay, there is a related question. Okay, so do you have active integration with ChatGPT? So ChatGPT will be able to generate Flutter code?
I have been using ChatGPT a lot to generate Flutter code, and I've been testing Bard a lot, which is Google's kind of a version of that. Both seem pretty good at it from my standpoint. I think it's similar to the way it supports other languages where it's good for writing boilerplate code faster, but when you try to ask it to do complex things, sometimes it like hallucinates or gives you wrong answers.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much. I don't know, take too much time. Thank you.
Thanks.
I raised the hand. Mahesh, you opened a good question. Leigha, we were chatting before this meetup about a Figma framework. I know nothing what's involved, but I like that idea of, generative AI, generating Figma, and there are these converters. So I'll paste my question again in the chat for others. What can you tell us about that, like Figma to Flutter generators?
Yeah, so Figma is super cool for those who don't know about it. It's a UX design tool. So it's similar to, things that you would do in the Adobe suite. Like people used to use Adobe XD a lot. Now Figma is all web-based. It's very like collaborative. So it's becoming more and more popular. And there are a lot of integrations. So Figma has its own marketplace and open source plugin API. So a lot of people have created their own Flutter code generators in Figma, which is pretty cool. The one thing I'll say about code generation from UI tools in general is that we have a lot of pre-built components in the material and Cupertino libraries that I mentioned before. These are things like, like text input boxes or styled buttons or things that have like some design to them. But when you're generating code from these design systems, it often generates to like lower level primitives like rectangular boxes or circles and stuff like that. So you kind of lose the benefit of the fact that like, oh, the Flutter framework actually has a button, but now like Figma is generating a button that's made of like a square and all these methods instead of using the button class. So I think that's a really difficult problem to solve. And I've talked to a couple of people in the Flutter community that are trying to solve it through machine learning and AI and stuff. I haven't seen anything production ready yet, but I'm excited for what's to come.
Thank you. Thank you for answering my Google search. Alonso has a question.
Yeah, another question just came to mind. I was wondering if Flutter has access to like the HomeKit APIs, speaking more on in terms of like the Apple ecosystem.
So the way Flutter talks to Apple's APIs, there's kind of two ways. One is called a method channel, and you basically like the root of your Flutter iOS app is a native iOS app. And if you open that, it basically just says like create an app and then like delegate everything to Flutter. But in that code, like before you delegate everything to Flutter, you can create your own methods and kind of like pass information back and forth through this concept of method channels, like over to the Dart side, back to the native side. So that's great if you know if you know how to use Swift or, whatever, Objective-C, whichever one. But if you don't, then it becomes a bit annoying, and also maybe you have to write it twice because you have Android too. So that's where these plugins like that I showed on pub.dev come into play. So people have basically already done these for most. Let me share this out. So maybe there is one for HomeKit, or maybe not. I'm not sure. I will say that we need to improve our searching on here. But a lot of people have already kind of wrapped around the native APIs using plugins, and then you can just import plugins. We have a whole, let me see, Apple frameworks. So we have this whole page that kind of maps Flutter plugins to the Apple framework. So like StoreKit, you can use in-app purchase, PassKit, you can use Pay, all that good stuff. But if you don't, putting that whole thing aside for a second, those are all using method channels. One thing we're working on now is leveraging Dart's interop capabilities with Objective-C and Swift to just talk to the native APIs directly in your Dart code. So I talked about this at our event in January. I can send a recording afterwards, but it's this thing that we're working actively on right now, and it's out in kind of like a alpha preview stage, but we're adding new features like every day. But the goal is to make it super easy to just like call those native APIs directly in your Flutter app, which will be really cool. So you write the Dart code and then it like automatically generates some bindings so that it's calling those native APIs behind the scenes.
Awesome.
Yeah. The one thing I will say is I'm not too familiar with HomeKit, but there are like some Apple APIs that draw UI, like WidgetKit. Yeah, everyone's into the home screen widgets and Dynamic Island right now. WidgetKit draws the UI, so it's very restrictive actually over which APIs you can access, and they all are written with Swift UI views. So something like that, like Flutter can't really work with. We instead like make it easier to share data with your widget, but you would still have to write that home screen widget with Swift UI because it doesn't have access to those low-level graphics APIs that Flutter needs to draw UI. So I always like to caveat that, like it's very flexible, and there are ways to like call Apple APIs really easily, but there are some cases where you might just have to write a little bit of native code to get it to work.
Awesome. And the other question that I had was, what excites you about the future of Flutter?
Well, the interop stuff I'm really excited about because when I talk to Apple developers, they're like, oh, I don't want to have to wait to have access to new things that Apple releases. Which I'm like, you don't really, because you could just write a method channel. Like I said, I'm not a software engineer, and but I was able to learn Flutter really quick. And I've written lots of method channels, and I don't know Swift that well either, but I've still been able to very easily write method channels to pass that information back and forth. But for people who really don't want to do that, I think all the interop stuff will be really interesting. The other thing I'm really excited about is we just rewrote our entire rendering engine from the ground up, rewrote the entire renderer to be more performant and to be more suited for Flutter's use cases. And since then, we've seen like really great performance benefits for iOS users. But it's also like opened up this whole new world of like different rendering capabilities. So people are starting to build like really cool 3D renderers and like custom renderers on top of these like low level frameworks that we've exposed. So yeah, if you're interested, you just Google Flutter Forward and you can watch our demos from January, and we like showed how to create like 3D widgets in Flutter and make them animate. That stuff is just so fun.
Awesome. I'll check it out.
Yeah, that's a good website. Thank you. But your mod is like your BigQuery code behind the looker was amazing. I learned so much from it. So it is easy, but you're really smart.
Thanks. Yeah, I still get a lot of messages about BigQuery videos. Oh, I saw someone said which graph plot library. Oh, I just recently built something in Flutter where I needed, I'm trying to pull up my code right now, where I needed to create a graph. And so I had to find some good parting libraries. And now I'm trying to find which one did I use. Let's see. Can't remember the name of it. Maybe it was just, I think it was just called Flutter Charts, perhaps. Oh no, that's not it. I don't know. I can't remember what it was called. I have to find it, and I will find your email and ask you later.
DM me and FL charts.
Yeah.
And I'll share with the community with the slide deck if they get it, or a recording of the video.
Perfect. Or I can even send you the code that I was looking at. It's in our it's in here. And we added somewhere in the, I think, experimental folder or somewhere in this repository, there's a pedometer app. And that pedometer app has some charts on it. And whatever library we used in that was really, really easy to use and created for nice looking charts.
I have a silly question, opposite direction completely. Like from artistic point of view, it's beautiful to create something one of kind, unique. But if you're a backend person, if you just kind of have a company, want to have a mobile app quickly, are there any shell apps that are just basic CRUD, log me, log out, that you can start the apps for the people who don't want to differentiate? Like,
well, that's also where the material library comes into play, because you could build an app, within a few minutes with that thing. It comes with all the UI components that you would need. And the nice thing is Material is Google's design system, so it looks nice out of the box. It's a lot of really talented designers have come up with it. But of course, if you did want to just build like a really basic like shell app, you could do that in Dart too, and just not even have the UI component.
are there any examples that we can build from, or have to start from scratch? Like Firebase has some, taking care of login of stuff.
Oh yeah, we integrate really well with Firebase too. Like, we have Firebase's login package where you can just like call like Firebase login, and it has the pre-built UI for login flows. So if Flutter is in Firebase's documentation too. So if Firebase has some like tutorials, I bet they have a Flutter version of it.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question here, Harry. You want to say it, or we need to read?
So do you have comparative thoughts on Flutter versus Xamarin or Flutter versus Power Apps? Is Power Apps like the Microsoft low-code thing? I don't know exactly what power apps are, but I think Xamarin is kind of in that bucket that I was talking about before, where I think it uses kind of like it compiles to like a higher level language. So I've heard that apps could maybe not be as performant. In general, like when I'm looking at the data, it seems like Xamarin isn't growing as much in popularity as some other frameworks. I personally haven't used it, so I can't talk to my own experience, but these are just things I've heard from other developers.
In the meetup invite, I posted the link. We always kind of have homework for whoever's curious to read up. So one of the links was Stack Overflow article. I use that image about popularity of Flutter and why for announcing it. And maybe Harry, that would answer as well.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, I native a little bit. Have not personally used Xamarin, or Ionic is the other one that a lot of people ask me about. But I think that I've seen a lot of like Medium posts that compare them. So I bet you could find some good information from people who've used both.
And I wanted to thank you for shortening our meetups, because we started online meetups to be 2 hours like the offline meetups, but 1 hour is perfect. Short presentation, lots of fast questions. So thank you. Jonathan, we can use the format.
I have to go to the New York Rangers game. They're in the playoffs, and their game 4 today against the Devils. So,
Cynthia, you have a couple more minutes before we are late.
Yeah, just a quick question. So how often do you, since this is my first time, how often do you guys have your meetings?
Normally once a month, but topics are all over the place. Like we are radio station, we are like station, we don't know what we're going to play next. Whatever.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, guys.
Any other questions? I pasted the link in the chat for the raffle. Like only 3 or 4 folks filled it in. Jose, go ahead.
Yeah, just one last quick question. What resources does Google offers for people that would like to create developer groups for Flutter? Because like I live in the US, and the user groups that I've seen around Flutter, there are like, there are not that many, at least on the East Coast where I am. So.
oh, that's a really great question. I think we have some good things on our, or here, let me share this tab. Developers.google.com/community. Here, let me just send you.
GDG. So it's not Flutter specific, you're saying, it's a generic for other Google.
I think you can lead a chapter and maybe have it be Flutter specific. We have a lot of like Google developer groups that focus on Flutter, or some people have just created meetup groups that are not even totally affiliated with Google. So I think the Google developer groups maybe have like a formal affiliation to Google. So they might have like certain funding or access or something. But like I go to the Flutter meetup New York City group whenever they have a meetup in person. And that's just run by like a Flutter developer.
Yeah, so that would be my advice. You don't need official group because somebody's going to censor you. I know people from Europe who lost the GDG license because they invited somebody wants to hear. And it happens opposite way. Every cloud is censoring. Like you cannot even post about this visit in Azure meetups because Microsoft doesn't allow anything. So you're better off starting like Jonathan and I did independent.
This person, I don't know if you can see her Twitter, Nilay, is like the organizer of all things Flutter community groups. So you could always try to DM her or like follow her. And I think she often posts like tips and information about starting Flutter communities.
And if you have ideas, you can be our guest and promote yourself here. We have 3,000 people. So.
Yeah.
That is so beautiful. Thank you. It's really lovely to see you. And then for the folks who don't know Leigha from the past, like I met you through Looker and through BigQuery, and this is the 3rd incarnation of you. So this is like I'm in IT 35 years. There is every 5 years you have to learn something new, and you did it 3 times over. This is really plausible. So thank you.
Thanks so much, both Daniel and Jonathan. Thanks for having me back again. And I hope you all play around with Flutter for those who haven't tried it yet.
We will. And enjoy the game.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Excellent presentation.
Bye.
Thank you all.
But don't go, guys. We have we have a raffle. We have a raffle, and I see only a couple names over there. So did you do the survey? How did you like it? Leigha is always fun to listen to.
Yeah, no, that was great. I thought that the presentation was good. It was nice and short, but to the point. We saw the demos, the good links too there. There's a lot of resources that we can look at. That the REPL, or what do they call it? The Dart Dev, or whatever. That looks great. You know, just jump right in there and start playing around.
And thank you for good questions, because I know nothing about Flutter.
Yeah, no, the group was great today. Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Awesome. We hope to see you. So next time it's going to be kind of database driven, but it's database modeling, so you can talk with the business, which is important as well for the project to succeed. So, and then we don't know what happens after that. Probably some ChatGPT everybody's talking about. We'll see our bars. Hey, Stuart, hi. So did you do the survey, Stuart? And you know what's funny, Stuart? Turn on the camera.
Yeah, I did the survey.
Yeah, hey, Stuart, I worked with Stuart in 2000 to 2004. You look the same. Now he looks like a curious case of Benjamin Button and an old man. It's unbelievable. You have really good genes, Stuart.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of front end work in the last year. It's pretty
That helps with good hair, huh?
Angular, you know, like another Google creation in a different direction.
Awesome. So okay, so I will share the link with the survey. Let's see how many people did the survey.
Yeah, we're down to about 9 left. So yeah, you better do this.
You're gonna be good. It's gonna be good odds for
Good
you
odds this week or this month.
Let me see. Let me copy the names. So I see. Oh my God, not too many people. Today. Hang on a sec. I'm not going to copy emails, but names, because it's recorded. And let's share. How do we call wheels of name? And I need to share the screen again. Share. Entire screen. Anybody else doesn't see their name in here? Okay, any other names? Anybody we didn't forget? We didn't forget? No? Last chance? Okay. Good luck. So how it works? It's going to be, you're going to go to Manning. Are you with us? Am I pronouncing name correctly? Raj. Raj, are you with us? If you're not with us, I cannot. Raj, if you left, I will not be able to find you.
He's there. We're here.
Yeah, I'm here actually.
That's beautiful. So paste your email so that you're going to use with Manning here. And then I'm going to introduce you to the folks for Manning Publishing. They have really good priced books, and you get digital product, but it can be course, it can be video, it can be any product you want, and you have time until the next meetup to make up your mind. So shorter than like 2 or 3 weeks. So paste your email here. Paste your email here in the chat. And that's all for me. Like, Jonathan, is there anything else?
No, I think that's it. We'll probably do a short one this time.
I like it. This was really efficient.
Yes. Good.
So thank you everyone for having me. Hope to see you again, and happy fluttering.
Happy, playing with the Flutter. And you already gave the date for the next one. Yeah, it's
May 5th. Hope to see you. That's going to be a good one. When I share the slide deck, you will see the link to his past talk. So he was already talking, but it was so short that people asked if they to do the deep dive. And it's a company, Montreal Analytics, Canadian. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of people enjoyed the last one with Jacob, so that will be good.
Beautiful.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll
Stay
see
safe.
you on May 5th.
Yep. Ciao.